the cat wax division. Cat wax stands for catalysts and wax. And from the waxy crude oil they get from Indonesia and Utah, they break it apart and make food grade wax, which they use for things like making wax lips for kids or the cover for Dixie cups and things like that. And because it's in the middle of a refinery, you drive through the gate and then you go into this area that all above you and all around you are these pipes that are in groups of, dozens going over you with different colors. And that's where all the different chemicals and different things they use are going through it all day and all night. When they would notify us of a chemical release, it was done in a very casual way. You get a note in your corporate mailbox, or somebody comes in and says, before you leave today, we'll wash your car because we had some issue and chemical release. Oh, okay. And that was it. You weren't told what was released. What would happen is there would be some sort of event, which they wouldn't tell you about, but they would say, okay, everyone's going to get their car washed today because they're all covered in something. And you would say, okay, fine. And I also began to notice that all of the men, and it was strictly men who were working there at the time, would come in, in their outfits with their hard hat, and they all had kind of these large boils on their head that were semi-permanent, or at least they looked like they'd been hit with a baseball or a bat. And the people who had been there the longest had the biggest ones. I drive into the facility on dirt roads that are oiled down so they're not muddy when it rains, to this little hut, and I park near the hut and go into it, and it's probably 3 or 4 offices, and there's nothing in there but just 2 or 3 of us, and filing cabinets full of these sort of pages that are filled out with numbers of the levels of things. So when we're not in a place where there's anything flowing, except above us and around us, there's all these pipes, which is really fascinating because I can't remember, I was talking to somebody and I asked them, what is in that pipe there? It was a strange looking pipe. Oh, that's the water supply that comes in and cools such and such. Oh, okay. How do you know it's that one? Well, you can tell by the color, and you can tell by the tape that's around those edges there. It tells you, you know that signifies water. Okay, great. And then what is that? Well, that's probably one of the catalyst pipes that's going through, and et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't dig any farther because I was kind of overwhelmed and trying to keep my head above water with all the work. But eventually I came across a system that I knew when the files were going to come in. I was ready, sort of knew where they were going to go, and off they went. And then I had some free time. And, I was working as a temp, sorting out the sheets that keep track of all the different processes throughout the day, so that when a supervisor would fill out his sheet of how different things are going, he would put it in a box and I would file it away. The irony of all this, of course, is that I was the underling of another person, the actual secretary who worked there. And when I got there, there were stacks and stacks of these black folders that hadn't been filed. And she said, well, your job will be to file these because I just haven't had time. She reminded me of something right out of the late 50s, early 60s, in the way she dressed and the way she looked, both with her sort of hair. And she wasn't that old. She was probably in her early 40s, but she just had this look like she just dropped out of the late 50s. And I think my second or third week there, and I'm organizing things, and I'm worried if I'm working, fast enough. And she comes in and she just puts a Post-it note on one of the black folders, and it says C.Y.A. I'm like, C.Y.A.? Cover your ass. Oh, okay. But what I found out was these stacks and stacks and stacks of things were there because she was completely inept at organizing anything. And the reason they brought me in was to do the work that she wasn't doing, because she mostly spent her time outside on smoke breaks. Maybe in about 2 months, I had the entire floor clean of these things, and suddenly I had nothing to do because the folders would come in, I would sort them, and then I was done. So I would sit there on the computer and compose music while she did what she did, which I was never quite sure what she did. And eventually she quit, and I was there as a temp running the office and keeping things going. And it wasn't until about the third chemical release that I decided that it's probably too dangerous of a place to work if you haven't had children yet.